You know you don't understand this, but I like you. You know. You. Yes, you. Just the way you are. There are times I don't like what you do. And there are times I don't like how you act. And there are times that I don't like some of the things about you. But I like you. But you know, more important than that, because I'm a Christian, I love you. You see, I've gone beyond my liking, and I've decided that I love you. I choose to love you. I don't choose to like what you're doing. I don't choose to play the game of, well, I love you, but I don't like you, or I like you, but I don't love you. No, I choose to say to you, and to demonstrate that by my life and my actions when we meet, that I love you, because I pray for you, and I care about what you're doing with your life. Because you see, love has always been an assertion of a direction with which we would bear fruit. It is something that automatically happens within the plant world, but we don't completely understand in the human mindset. Because the plant world, when it gets light, and it gets water, and it gets that good soil that it needs, it automatically bears fruit. And that fruit is something that, if it's done in the right proportions, tastes delicious. It is accomplishing its purpose. It is designed to do that so that it could reproduce. And it reproduces by way of causing other plants of like mind and like nature and like species and like fruit to bear the same fruit. And that's why there are so many horticulturists that graft or try to make the plant just into this perfect plant, because then it keeps reproducing itself into the same kind of plant. And then you get this great yield and harvest of that fruit. And love is like that, because the love that God talks about is something you can't have by way of your normal emotions, because that changes. I mean, you could say I love you, and what good does that do? Because that's not really what God is talking about. That's talking about how you feel. And no offense, but while I like you, I don't care about your feelings so much as I care about what your fruit is. I care about what is lasting in you, what is going to always be there, which is love. Because if you learn what love is, then you discover that it's more than just some feeling, because that's something that you get by way of its after effects, the consequence of love. That's what you feel, because you see, feeling isn't what love really is. Love, in that essence of nature, is God. That's what God in you is. That little tiny spark, the little tiny bit of what people that are ungodly have that they claim is love when they phileo or sturgio or do all these Greek words, when they think that they feel something, you know, that little tingly or that first love kind of feeling, you know, all those things that we describe when it comes to feelings, that's just the effect of God in you. Because there's a little bit of saving grace in you, a little bit of God in every person, that because He created you, you have that spark, so to speak, like the Jews used to talk about, or that little after nature of the Creator having left something of Himself, His own little thumbprint or fingerprint on what He's made by way of it being in you, that little nature of God in you. Tiny, tiny amount. But you see, that tiny, tiny amount, smaller than a mustard seed, could grow into salvation, because every man has been given the opportunity to come to salvation. They could come to know God. They could come to love God if that germination happens by way of the Spirit coming into that person and causing him to be born again. But if not, then they don't really know, nor can they understand what love is, what that nature of God is, that choice, that I, by the freedom that I have from my fleshy lusts and all the aggravations of sin therein, having been set free, that I am now a spiritual being that wars against the flesh and the flesh against the spirit, but that I have a soul that is emotive both to the spiritual realm and to the physical realm, that, oh, I could say I love you in the physical realm, and I could react to you in the physical way. And that would be love in the physical world. But you see, I choose to love you in the spiritual realm. I choose to love you with the fruit of the Spirit. I choose to exercise my ability to make a determination based upon the mind that I have of Christ to choose the way I will go with the love that God has put inside me so that it will grow. Because I want to be a spiritual being. I want to have a spiritual body. I want to have spiritual feelings. I don't want to have fleshy feelings that only lead to lust and only satisfy the flesh, which is perishing and passing away because it's imperfect. Rather, I want to have that perfect love. I choose to exercise that perfect relationship that God has placed in me, that has grown to such an overwhelming and outgoing spring of life in me that it has become love to you. Because now I can love you. I can choose to allow that wellspring of life to go out from me and to love you as I choose to. Because it's not based upon my feelings. It's based upon the fact of God in me. And as God is in me, I demonstrate that God is in me by the love that I have for you. Because as I love you, I show Jesus. As I care for you with the spiritual abilities that I have to pour out upon you, all the love and compassion, the grace and the mercy, the gentleness, the kindness, the tenderness, the transparency of who I am, to open up and to allow myself to share with you my soul and spirit. Then you go past the flesh that I don't like. Because you see, not only do I not like your flesh, I don't like my flesh. And I would rather we both crucified the flesh so that we could both share in the communion of the Spirit, so that our souls would be one and we would become in love with each other. As Jesus said, by this shall you all know that my disciples indeed, in that you have love for one another. And it wasn't the love of the physical realm. It wasn't the love of the dimension that we live in. It's the love of inside the dimension that God exists. And that's why it's so confusing to some people when they say, I love you, I love you, I love the feeling I have for you. But when they fall out of the feeling, they don't love anymore, do they? They choose to go a different direction because they made the choice. They took their soul and their spirit and moved on to something else. And suddenly they're distracted. And they no longer have the attraction to that person that they said they loved only in the physical realm. Better we had a better word than love. But that's what we have. So because God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life, I have an example of what God is like when he says God is love. For everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God, but he that loveth not knoweth not God. So I love you. And if I love you, then I want what's best for you. If I love you, then I want to encourage you. If I love you, then I want to exhort you. If I love you, then I want to bless you. If I love you, then I want to give grace to you. If I love you, then I want to pray for you. If I love you, then I want to thank you. So you see, I do love you. I just don't like some of the things you're doing. I don't like your flesh, but I love your spirit because Jesus is there. I love your soul because, you see, it goes back and forth. Sometimes your soul is kind of like feeling, kind of like, feelings, nothing more than feelings. It's all wrapped up in the flesh. But there are times where I watch you and I see you from a distance, in a worship service, or I see you with God moving in your life. And I see the times where you're by yourself and you cry and you weep and you agonize unto the Lord. And I see in you the glory of my King. And so I love you. And so I make the choice to love you. And that's what you can do. Choose you this day whom you will serve, and by this shall you know that you are serving the Lord your God. Because if you're choosing to love, then you are serving God. But if you're choosing anything else other than love, you're failing miserably because you're not doing what God said, and you're no longer allowing God to be in you. For everyone that loveth is born of God and knows God. Go to your room. And I have filled him with the Spirit of God, in wisdom and ability, in understanding and intelligence, and in knowledge and in all kinds of craftsmanship. Exodus 31:3. My children didn't like it when I started to spend time alone to seek God. They said, "You're always in that room." One day I told them, "You better be glad that I'm in that room, because it is making your life a whole lot better. If you were smart, you would beg me to go to my room instead of calling me to come out." Next time you find yourself screaming, ranting, raving, and carrying on at your children, or anyone else for that matter, excuse yourself and say, "I'm going to my room." Take time to ask God what He thinks of everything that is going on. You will probably quickly get your day started over right away and in that moment. Have you made room for God in your life? Or are you filling the room with your will and your way? Have you filled up your life with the soul and the flesh? You know, the flesh giving you all these feelings that you can self-gratify, that you can make happen, that you can somehow get yourself into that position of falling in love, and over and over again falling and falling and falling. Because you see, as soon as you can put the word falling in love, you already know you're blowing it, because love isn't about falling, it's about growing. You see, that's the difference between the world and God. God's love grows. The world falls. And the love that you're usually involved in is fallen in nature, because you fell in love with it in the first place. So you see the difference? Do you really understand, or begin to understand, the love of God? The love that God has for you to share with other people, and to say to some other person, to all other people, to even the world, if you should be so blessed as for God to bring you to that place that you could love the world, even the ungodly, even the, like the sexual perverts and all those weirdos that are doing the wrong things, that are like messed up and kind of screwed up in their head, and they don't realize the love that could change their life and bring them to the realization of God Almighty. Huh. I love you. I don't know what you're going to do with that, but I know what God has done with me with it. And because I was always searching for love, not in the wrong places, but in the wrong personage of who I was, I could not know love until I was born again. Because he that loveth is born of God and knoweth God, but he that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. And so I didn't know what love was, and I didn't know that I couldn't find it in the physical realm, because that was all about what my soul was telling my body I felt. But when it's growing in your spirit, then your spirit is telling your soul, God is in it. And when God is in it, God is love. And you know what that means. It just grows and grows and grows. The closer you get to God, the more you love. The more you love, the closer you are to God. If you want to get close to God, love more. But don't love on this side of it with your flesh. Love on this side of it with your spirit. For you see, God is love.